Wyoming Territory, late autumn, 1882. The wind had teeth that night, sharp and mean, like it wanted to peel the skin from your bones. Nathaniel Grant had just finished spreading hay in the barn when he caught the flicker of movement at the edge of the porch light. He squinted through the falling snow. Someone was standing there. He stepped up onto the wooden porch, hand hovering near the revolver at his hip. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached the figure huddled in the shadows. The woman was soaked through. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and mud clung to the hem. She looked half frozen, arms wrapped around herself, lips trembling. Her eyes jerked up at the sound of his boots, wide and full of something between fear and exhaustion. "I don't care about your past," Nathaniel said, voice low and steady. "Just stay." Her breath caught. She blinked at him like she was not sure she heard right. "You look like you walked through hell to get here," Nathaniel added, stepping back and pushing the door open behind him. "Come inside. You'll freeze out here." She hesitated, then stepped forward. Her legs gave out halfway up the steps. Nathaniel caught her before she hit the boards. She was light in his arms, too light. He carried her into the warm glow of the firelight, kicked the door shut behind him, and set her carefully on the couch. He grabbed the quilt draped over the back and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Name's Nathaniel Grant," he said, crouching beside her. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "Just cold." He stoked the fire higher. She sat stiffly, clutching the quilt like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her eyes roamed the room, wary. "What's your name?" he asked. "Georgia," she said after a moment. "Georgia Hale," Nathaniel nodded. "Well, Georgia Hale, you are safe now." She swallowed hard, eyes filling with tears she fought not to shed. He saw at a flicker of pain she was trying to bury. "You have any children?" he asked gently. She flinched. "I had two," she whispered. "Violet and Vernon, they're gone. I left them behind." Nathaniel's chest tightened. "They were not safe with me," she said, voice cracking. "I could not protect them. I thought maybe if I left, the man chasing me would leave them be." He sat on the floor beside her, his voice quiet. "Was he their father?" She nodded. "He was cruel. I stayed too long. I am not proud of that." Nathaniel did not look away from her. "You got out. That counts for something." Georgia turned toward the fire, her profile lit orange and gold. "I walked 5 days, slept under trees, ate snow." Nathaniel stood and brought her a cup of coffee from the pot he kept simmering on the stove. She took it with shaking hands and nodded in thanks. "You can stay," he said, "no matter what's behind you." She looked up at him, startled. "Why would you help me?" "Because someone should have," he said. "And because I want to." The fire crackled between them. Nathaniel had lived alone since his brother died in the war, this ranch the only thing left of his family. He did not expect company, least of all a woman like her, battered, trembling, but still standing, still fighting. He watched her fingers tighten around the mug. Her face was drawn, hollowed by hunger and fear, but her eyes were alive, strong. "I will not be trouble," she said after a long moment. "I can cook, mend, I will work for my keep." "You do not owe me anything," Nathaniel said. "But if working eases your mind, I won't stop you." Georgia looked like she wanted to say more, but her eyes were already drifting shut. The coffee slipped from her hand. Nathaniel caught it before it spilled and eased her back against the couch cushion. He watched her sleep, her brow still furrowed even in rest. As the wind howled outside, he added more wood to the fire and grabbed another quilt to drape over her. He had no idea who she had been before tonight, but he knew one thing clear as day: she was not leaving this house unless she wanted to. And something told him she did not want to anymore. Nathaniel went to the window and looked out over the snow-covered range. The storm had settled in for the night, but for the first time in a long while his house was not silent. There was breathing, warmth, life. He turned back toward the woman asleep on his couch, Georgia Hale. He had no idea what the days ahead would bring, but he knew what he felt already rising in his chest like a steady flame. Hope. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving a hard crust of snow over the prairie and a brittle silence beneath the gray sky. Nathaniel stepped outside to check the stock, the breath from his horse rising in thick puffs as he saddled him. Inside the barn, he counted the cattle, ran his hand down the flank of a restless mare, and made note of a cracked fence post near the east pasture. He worked with quiet efficiency, though his thoughts wandered back to the woman sleeping on his couch. When he returned, Georgia was no longer on the couch. The quilt lay folded neatly at the arm, and the scent of buckwheat and hot lard wafted from the kitchen. Nathaniel stepped inside and found her at the stove, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a cast iron skillet hissing beneath her hand. "You didn't need to do that," he said, pulling off his gloves. "I know," she said, not turning. "But I wanted to." The table had been wiped down, the window glass cleared of soot. She moved with quiet purpose, her chin lifted, though her shoulders still carried the memory of whatever she'd come from. He watched her slide a biscuit onto a plate and set it down with care. "There's honey in the cupboard," he offered. "I found it," she said softly. "I only used a little." He sat across from her. "You didn't have to clean anything. I couldn't just sit. My hands get restless when they're not doing something." Her voice was steady, but her eyes didn't stay on him long. She poured 2 cups of chicory and sat across from him, folding her fingers around the warm tin. Nathaniel took a bite, then nodded. "You bake like someone who spent hours in a kitchen." "My aunt kept a boarding house in Kansas when I was a girl. She taught me to make do with whatever we had. Sometimes that meant baking with cornmeal and vinegar when we had no eggs." He smiled faintly. "She sounds like she was tough." "She was." Georgia glanced out the window. "She died the year the locusts came, buried her under a cottonwood tree that didn't survive either." Nathaniel didn't speak, just sipped his coffee, Georgia's hands stilled around her mug. "You said last night I could stay," she said. "Does that still hold?" He met her gaze. "I don't say things I don't mean." She looked down at her plate. "Then I'll earn my keep. You've got a cow with a limp and a coop missing slats. I noticed on my way in from the privy." His brow lifted. "You always take stock wherever you land." "Only when I don't know how long I'll be welcome." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "You're welcome here, as long as you want it." Her hands tightened slightly around the cup. "I don't suppose there's a wagon or horse I could use." "Not to go anywhere far, just to send word." "Depends who you're sending it to." She hesitated. "My sister. She's in Cheyenne. I want her to know I'm alive. Not where I am, just that I made it out. I've got a man who brings supplies from town every 3rd week. I can send it with him." Her shoulders eased just a little. "Thank you." Nathaniel stood and set his plate in the basin. "I'll be fencing the east line this afternoon. If you're still aiming to keep busy, there's a pile of split wood needs stacking." She nodded. "I'll see to it." He reached for his coat, then paused at the door. "If you ever want to talk about any of it, you can." Georgia met his eyes, and this time she didn't look away. "What if I don't have the words yet?" "Then don't use them," he said. "There's no clock ticking here." She held his gaze until he stepped outside, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. Later that day, she stood in the yard, sleeves rolled, stacking larch and pine in even rows against the shed. Her hands were red and raw by the time she finished, but she didn't stop until the last split was in place. She turned toward the hills, watching the wind stir the brittle grass just beyond the last drift of snow. That night, they ate in silence. Not the kind that hung heavy with things unsaid, but the kind that settled around them like a blanket, solid, untroubled. When she finally stood to clear the dishes, Georgia glanced toward him. "I never slept in peace before," she said. "Not like I did last night." Nathaniel looked up from the tin oil lamp he was trimming. "Then I hope you'll sleep the same tonight." She hesitated, then nodded and turned toward the wash basin. The fire crackled low behind them. Outside, the wind had quieted, and for the first time in weeks, so had something inside her. Neither said anything else, but when Georgia passed behind him, brushing close as she reached for a towel, their shoulders touched. It was brief, intentional, and neither of them moved away. The first thaw came early that year. By late March, the snow retreated from the southern slope of the hills, revealing patches of hard, packed earth and last summer's brittle weeds. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a pale warmth across the worn table where Georgia knelt with a needle and thick thread, patching a saddle blanket Nathaniel had left by the door. He entered quietly, brushing dried mud from his boots on the threshold. "I'll ride out west today," he said, setting a tin pail on the floor. Couple of calves wandered past the creek line. Georgia nodded without looking up. "I'll keep supper warm." He sat across from her, unwrapping a strip of dried venison. "You been riding before?" She paused, then met his eyes. "Enough to know it's easier than staying in one place." He chewed slowly. "You miss it." "I miss the parts that didn't hurt." Her fingers moved with practiced care along the torn seam. "The quiet of it, the space. Not the eyes watching every time I mounted up. They watching cause you rode better than them, maybe." Her mouth lifted at the corner, not quite a smile. "Or maybe because I didn't ask permission." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You want to come with me today?" She looked up, brows knitting. "You sure that's wise?" "I asked, didn't I?" She set the blanket aside. "Then I will if your horse can carry my weight." "We'll take two," he said, already standing. "You'll ride my mother's mare. She's steady and stubborn. Like someone else I know." Georgia followed him to the barn, the sun warming her shoulders for the first time in weeks. Nathaniel handed her the reins of a broad-backed bay with a white mark between her eyes. "She's called Mercy," he said. "Though she don't look it. She's beautiful." Georgia stroked the mare's neck. "I haven't saddled one in years." She moved around the horse with ease, tightening the cinch and adjusting the stirrup without needing help. Nathaniel watched, saying nothing, but the approval in his eyes was quiet and sure. They rode out just past midday, following a narrow trail that wound along the creek bank. The ground was still damp in places, but the ice had pulled back, leaving clear water burbling over stone. They moved in silence for a while, the only sound the muffled rhythm of hooves and the distant lowing of cattle. Eventually, Georgia spoke. "Your folks buried nearby." Nathaniel kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Up near the ridge. My ma died when I was 16, pa a few years later. He drank too much after she passed." "I'm sorry." "Nothing to be sorry for. It was a long time ago." She glanced sideways. "You've done well with the place." "I try to keep it honest." They crested a rise and paused. Below, two calves nosed at a patch of exposed grass while an older steer stood watch. "There they are," Nathaniel said, dismounting. "We'll drive 'em back slow." Georgia slid from the saddle and moved toward the calves, her voice low and coaxing. Nathaniel circled wide, herding them gently with practiced ease. It took less than an hour to guide the animals back toward the homestead. As they rode side by side, Georgia broke the quiet. "Did you ever think about leaving, selling the land?" "I did once," he said. "Right after my brother died. Everything felt hollow, but I stayed." "Why?" He turned to her, his voice steady. "Because some things are worth keeping even when they hurt." She didn't answer right away. The horses moved slowly beneath them, hooves soft in the thawing earth. "I thought if I kept moving, the past wouldn't catch up," she said. "Turns out it just follows quieter." Nathaniel's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. "You're not running now." "No," she said, her voice low. "I think I stopped the night I showed up on your porch." They returned just as the sky began to shift to rose and gold. Georgia unsaddled Mercy while Nathaniel checked the pen. When she joined him at the fence, he handed her a tin cup of water and leaned his elbows against the rail. "You're good with animals," he said. "I trust them more than people." He looked at her, quiet for a beat. "Am I people?" The corner of her mouth lifted. "You're something else." That night she sat near the hearth, mending a cracked button on her blouse. Nathaniel sat across from her, sharpening a blade with slow, deliberate strokes. The fire cast long shadows along the cabin walls, flickering over their features, softening what the world had once hardened. "You ever think about staying?" he asked, not looking up. She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded once, her voice barely more than a breath. "I do now." Nathaniel set the blade down and met her eyes. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't look away. The wind had calmed by the next morning, leaving the prairie hushed and silvered with dew. Georgia stood at the edge of the corral, one hand resting lightly on the top rail as she watched Nathaniel work, a young gelding. He moved with firm patience, his voice low, and even as the animal circled, unsure but listening. She hadn't asked to come with him, but he'd nodded to her the moment he opened the barn door and she'd followed, boots crunching in the frost-hardened dirt. Now, she watched the way he handled the reins, nothing forced, just steady insistence. "You break all your horses like that?" she asked when the colt finally stopped, breathing hard but calm. Nathaniel glanced over, brushing a sleeve across his brow. "Only the ones I want to keep." She stepped closer, keeping her voice light. "And the ones you don't want to keep? Sell those before they learn bad habits." She leaned against the fence. "Seems a hard way to live. It's the only way that gets me through a winter." He let the reins drop loose and patted the colt's neck. "You ever break one yourself?" "I tried once," she said. "He threw me into a fence post and cracked 3 ribs." Nathaniel chuckled, a sound low and rare. "You try again." "I did," she said, mouth tilting. "And I stayed on that time." He watched her, eyes steady. "You always get back up." "Not always." She looked out toward the open field. "But I try not to stay down longer than I have to." Nathaniel unsaddled the horse and led it back to the barn. Georgia followed, quiet until the colt was secured and calm. Inside, the air was thick with hay and that earthy smell of warm hide and dust. "You got a place for planting?" she asked, resting a hand on the stall door. "South of the house," he said. "Soil's rocky, but it turns if you keep at it." "I'd like to try it," she said. "If you don't mind." He paused, then nodded. "I'll help you clear it. Ground'll be ready soon." They walked back to the house side by side, not speaking, but the silence between them felt different than before, less guarded. George's skirt caught on a bramble near the porch, and Nathaniel bent to untangle it, fingers careful. He didn't look up when he spoke. "You ever think about what comes next?" She hesitated. "I try not to." He straightened, meeting her gaze. "Maybe it's time to start." Inside, the house was warm from the morning fire. Georgia set a pot of beans to soak and gathered the flour sack to bake. Nathaniel sat by the window, oiling a worn rifle with slow, deliberate care. "I had a dream last night," she said as she worked. "About a house with a red door and a dog that never left the porch." He didn't interrupt. "There was a boy, too," she added. "Dark hair, about 7 or 8, he had his father's eyes." Nathaniel set the cloth down. "Was it a memory?" "No," her voice softened. "Just something I hadn't let myself picture before." He watched her a long moment before he spoke again. "You want that?" She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded once. "I think I do." That evening they sat out on the porch beneath a sky streaked with lavender. The air smelled of thawing earth and distant sage. Georgia wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Nathaniel leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "I've been thinking about expanding the barn." She looked over, curious. "You planning to take on more stock?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe just making room for something more." Georgia studied his profile, the way his jaw flexed when he was thinking. "You offering me something, Nathaniel?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "I'm saying this place feels different with you in it." Georgia looked down at her hands, then back at him. "I don't have anything to give but myself, no land, no name worth anything." "I don't care about any of that," he said. "I care that you want to be here." She reached over, laying her hand over his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain. "I'm tired of running," she said. "Then stay." The stars were just beginning to show, faint and scattered, like the start of something taking shape. Georgia leaned into his shoulder, her hand still in his, and the porch light behind them flickered softly, steady against the dark. The last frost broke in early April, softening the ground enough for planting. Nathaniel turned the soil with a mule and blade plow while Georgia followed behind, dropping seed in neat, careful rows. The work was quiet, but not from distance. There was a rhythm to it now, the kind built from knowing where the other would step before they moved. After they rinsed the dirt from their hands and sat on the porch with tin cups of cool well water, Georgia rested her head against the post and watched a hawk circle above the cottonwoods. "I heard a train whistle last night," she said, voice low. "Carried clean from the south with the wind." Nathaniel nodded. "Tracks run near Laramie. Sometimes it's loud enough to wake the horses. I used to think trains meant freedom. Now they just sound like other people heading somewhere I don't need to be. You'd go back to Cheyenne if you had reason. I had a letter from my sister. Came with the last supply run. She says the children are well, safe." He turned slightly toward her. "What else did she say?" She asked if I'd come back, just for a few nights, long enough to see them, let them see I'm all right. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. "You want to?" "I don't know, I do, but—" She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I'm afraid they won't remember me. Or worse, that they will." "You wouldn't be going back to stay?" "No," she said. "I wouldn't." "Then we'll go," he said. "Together." Her brow lifted. "You do that?" "I'd do anything that mattered to you." She looked down at her lap, the wind catching the edge of her shawl. "I can't promise what I'll feel walking into that house." "You don't have to promise anything," he said. "But you won't walk in alone." They left 3 days later, riding double on Mercy while Nathaniel's wagon carried supplies for the way back. The road to Cheyenne was rutted and slow, lined with scrub brush and the first wild lupine blooming low to the ground. They made camp beneath a stand of juniper, shared cornbread and dried beans from a tin plate, and slept shoulder to shoulder beneath a single quilt. When the town came into view, Georgia's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "You sure?" Nathaniel asked. She nodded. "I need to see them, even if it breaks me." They tethered the horses behind the bakery, a place Georgia remembered from before. She led him past the dry goods store, past the church with the long white eaves, and stopped before a narrow house with a blue door and a shutter missing its hinge. She didn't knock. Her sister opened the door before her hand rose. Georgia froze. The children stood behind their aunt, half hidden, eyes wide. Vernon held Violet's hand, though he looked older than she remembered. Taller, surer, Violet stepped forward first. "Mama," Georgia knelt, arms outstretched, and the girl flew into them. Vernon came slower, but he came. She folded them into her arms, tears falling silent down her cheeks. Nathaniel stayed by the fence, eyes soft, hat held low in his hands. Georgia's sister let her stay an hour. They spoke in hushed tones while the children played with a whittled horse Nathaniel had carved on the ride-in. When it was time to go, Georgia kissed each child's brow and whispered something only they heard. She walked back slowly, face unreadable. Nathaniel opened the wagon door, helped her in, and waited until the road curved out of town before he spoke. "They remember you. They do. Was it what you needed?" "It was," she said. "And I'm ready to go home." The journey back was quiet but not heavy. They stopped once near a creek where cottonwoods bent low to drink. Georgia sat on a boulder while Nathaniel refilled the canteens. "I thought I'd feel emptier," she said. "But I don't. I feel settled. Because you chose to go back, and you chose to leave again." She looked toward the hills. "I've been thinking," he waited. "I want to stay with you. I want to wake up with dirt under my nails and sun on my face and your boots by the door." He stepped closer, slow and sure, until he stood before her. "Then marry me." Her breath caught. "I don't have a ring," he said. "But I've got a home, and I've got a heart that's yours." She reached for his hand, placed it over her chest. "You already have mine." They married beneath the cottonwood nearest the barn, the one that bloomed late with pale green leaves. The preacher from the next valley rode out and said the words with dust on his collar and kindness in his voice. Nathaniel wore his cleanest shirt. Georgia wore a dress dyed with sage and trimmed with lace she'd sewn herself. After the vows, they shared bread with neighbors, danced slow to a fiddle tune played by a boy with a crooked grin, and watched the sky turn gold over the pasture. That night, in the quiet of their room, Georgia sat brushing her hair by lamplight. Nathaniel watched her from the doorway, arms folded, chest full. "You thinking about tomorrow?" he asked. "No," she said, smiling softly. "I'm thinking about forever." He crossed the room, took the brush from her hand, and set it aside. Their fingers twined without effort, as natural as the wind finding the grass. In the days that followed, the garden came up strong. Corn first, then beans curling around the poles Georgia had set herself. Mercy foaled a chestnut colt, and Nathaniel built an extra room on the north side of the house, just in case they ever needed it. Georgia wrote to her sister now and again. The letters were brief, but warm. Sometimes Vernon sent a drawing, violet pressed flowers between the pages. Every morning, Georgia stepped barefoot onto the porch, breathing in the scent of earth and sun-warmed pine. Nathaniel joined her, coffee in hand, his arm slipping around her waist. They didn't speak much in those moments. They didn't need to. Love had arrived not in a rush, but in the steady, enduring way of the land rooted deep, weathered through, and made to last.